Hello everybody, I'm here with Nick Wasko today at Palace Tattoo. He's so graciously agreed to do an interview for the book project and a little spotlight video. Nick, it's such a pleasure to meet you.
You too.
You've been on my mind for quite a while, and given your personal history, you've been a person that I've been really wanting to sit in front of and learn about your personal history.
Great.
So, thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. So what I always do is I like to go back to like your earliest memories of a tattoo. It sort of sets the stage in my mind. Mm-hmm. And so if you look back to your childhood, when would be the first time you saw a tattoo? Or
I don't know if I can absolutely pinpoint it. My grandfather had a bunch of tattoos. He was sort of got some in prison, got some when he was a carny in the 30s, and so he had quite a few legs, arms, hands. And so he would have been probably my first exposure. My dad had a friend who was an old East End guy named Tony Benny, and he had a bunch of tattoos.
Okay.
And we always used to look at him as kids. He had a mouse that was on his stomach with the tail going into his belly button, and he used to show us that all the time. And me and my brother would get a big kick out of that. So somewhere in there is probably very early childhood would have been my first exposure.
Sure.
Yeah.
And my mind is stuttering on your grandpa was a carny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did he do in the carnival?
I'm not totally sure. He had a real checkered past, and I'm not exactly sure what he did in the carnival, but he always had it's funny because there's a through line between my grandfather, my dad, and me and my brother with these phrases that are old carny phrases that have been in our family for years that we all just take for granted. Okay. And when we say them in mixed company, people have no idea what we're talking about. Me and my brother always laugh about that because it's like that. It's crazy that it dates back to the 30s and my grandfather, but my dad would say these things and then we say them now. It's pretty funny. Yeah. But what he did, I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because tattooing and carnivals it was hand to hand.
Yeah, right? For sure.
It's sort of steeped in that whole culture.
Yeah, exactly.
That was traveling across Canada.
Yeah.
It's like its own little subculture, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Its own languages and.
Exactly. Yeah. I only have one photograph of him where his tattoos are visible because he never ever showed them off in public. He was always, long sleeves in the middle of summertime. Okay. And so he was not real excited about them later on in his life.
Sure, yeah.
So
his wild and vicarious.
Yeah.
Your wild days were
past. Yeah. Right. He had a family. I think he was trying to be a little bit more respectful. My grandmother had a tattoo as well, actually.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, on her thigh, that she got probably in the 30s as well. Yeah. I never saw that one though, but my uncles told me about it.
And so, you seeing these as a young man, did it pique any early interest in wanting to get into tattooing?
Not to get into tattooing, but to definitely have tattoos. I think I've always wanted to have a tattoo. And I think that is just part of wanting the sort of a rebellious streak. Like I don't know. I've always associated with, probably from my dad and my grandfather, sort of counterculture and being involved in things that weren't particularly mainstream, and tattooing always was part of that for me. I always wanted to have one. Yeah.
And so at what age did you get a tattoo?
My first ones were when I was still a teenager. I was probably 17. And a friend of mine had a homemade tattoo machine that he'd made out of a Walkman motor and was tattooing up a bunch of our friends and stuff. So the first two I got were by him. Sure, yeah. At that point I didn't even really understand how tattoos worked or how you got a tattoo, and those were the first that were sort of available to me, so those were the ones that I got.
Did something kind of open up in your mind after you got it tattooed, like the fascination kind of grew?
Yeah,
from there.
Yeah, a little bit. My mom is English, and was really displeased when I got my first tattoos at 17. She was not happy, and honestly, that sort of like you know, I waited a couple more years because of how disappointed she was.
Sure.
And then probably by 21 or 22, I just started getting more because I wanted them real bad, you know.
Yeah.
And then my dad passed away when I was 25, and at that point I made I'm not sure why, but a conscious decision to be heavily tattooed. It stopped being, oh, I just wanted to have tattoos and one here and one here and one there, and then at that point in my life I was just like, I don't care anymore. I'm just, this is what I want to, this is the direction I want to go, you know.
Yeah.
And so I just started getting heavily tattooed. And the idea of actually tattooing didn't hit me until a tattooer who's now a very close friend of mine and somebody that I consider a mentor, a guy down in Seattle named Vince One. And I was getting heavily tattooed by him, and I was really into the history. I've always been interested in history of all kinds, but specifically tattoo history. And so we would talk about tattoos and talk about the history, and I would go down to Seattle and get heavily tattooed by him. And he had said to me at one point, he's like, man, you know a lot about tattooing. You love tattoos. You're getting covered in tattoos. Like, why have you never thought about tattooing yourself before? Mm-hmm. And it took somebody to say that out loud to me, for the sort of nickel to drop that was actually something I could do. At that point, I didn't understand even. I thought the tattoo gods picked you, you know, and dropped some fairy dust on you, and then you became a tattooer. I didn't think that it was available to everybody. Mm-hmm. And so when he said that out loud, I thought, shit, man, maybe this is something I could do.
Well, that was the hand of the tattoo god slapping. It's like, fucking pay attention, young
I guess
man.
so. Yeah, exactly. And literally from that point on, it was like there was nothing else that was I thought about, you know.
Okay. So it instantly clicked into like, this is a vocation. So I'm passionate about this, and I want to do this.
I just want to do this, and there's nothing else I want to do. I had been up until that point playing in a ton of bands and touring with bands and stuff. Mm-hmm. I was probably 25 or 26, and that just, I like completely abandoned that. It just wasn't, I just didn't have room for it anymore because I was completely focused, singularly focused on this one thing, tattooing, and everything else was sort of just like, I need to shelve this for now. Yeah. This is the most important thing to me.
Yeah. What kind of music?
Mostly punk stuff.
Punk, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a pretty common trait. Punk music, skateboarding.
Totally, yeah.
It's sort of the entry, the point of entry for a lot of people
for sure.
Get into tattooing. So then you decide that, you know, this is going to be a thing you're going to do. What are the next steps that sort of unfold for you?
Well, at that point, the history of tattooing was as important to me as learning to tattoo. Mm-hmm. All I ever wanted, and maybe this was the early exposure of my grandfather and my old man's friend Tony, they just had traditional tattoos. That's all they had. That's all, you know, the 30s, 40s, and 50s you could get, really. And that's all I ever wanted to have and wear. And it was sort of, that's all I was interested in. And so at that point in the early 2000s in Vancouver, there wasn't a lot of that happening, you know. It was really a custom-based culture here in Vancouver. Yeah. And the only place where any of that was available was at West Coast Tattoo at Thomas Lockhart's shop. And he had a really cool collection of, I still think to this day, the best old flash that exists anywhere. Mm-hmm. And it was all up on the walls. And his entire shop was just covered in flash, you know, like floor to ceiling, to the point where he had binders that he had tacked to the wall that were like 20 layers deep of flash, so you could flip through them. So it wasn't just one 11 by 14 sheet. It was 20 11 by 14 sheets in one space. Okay. And so it was crazy. Like, it was nuts. So I went in there, and that was just sort of game over for me, as far as there was nowhere else I wanted to be. You know, there was nowhere else that was like soaked in tattooing like that place was, you know. Everywhere else was sort of a tattoo shop, but, you know, maybe some prints on the wall, or, you know, a Hanya mask hanging by the cash register or whatever. But there was nothing that was just like, everywhere you looked was tattooing, you know. That was it. Neon signs that said tattooing, flash, machines hanging on the walls, everything. And so it just made sense to me that this is the place, you know, like this is where I'm going to get what I need, you know. Yeah. And so I hung around there every day. every day that I could. At that point, I was working in the film industry, which is big in Vancouver, and I would go there on my days off and just, as soon as he opened until as soon as he closed. And then that went, I made a decision that I was just going to be at the shop as much as I could. And so I worked and worked and worked and worked on this particular show that I was working on and just banked every single dollar. And then when that show came to a close, that was it. I was just going to be every day at Tom's shop. And I was. And I would stand out front at about 11:30, and he would roll up on his motorcycle, and I would hold the door open for him, and he would ride his motorcycle into the lobby, and I'd pick up the mail and just sort of make myself as useful as I could possibly be,
Okay.
And then that was it. I just lived off my savings and was at that shop every day, and it slowly turned into something, and then I ended up learning how to tattoo there.
And was there like a verbal agreement that you were there on the premise to learn? Or
No, I just didn't go anywhere, like I was just a pimple on his ass, and I just tried to make myself as useful as possible, what I mean? And so if he was tattooing, I was answering the phone, or I was cleaning the lobby, or I was emptying the garbage, or I was, disinfecting things, or scrubbing tubes, or, I was just trying to make myself as valuable to him as possible, to prove to him that I was, I was value added here, and that I was worthy,
That's right.
And then it probably took, a real long time of that before. And then it wasn't an understanding or an agreement. It was just like, well, I might as well show you how to make needles because I don't want to do it, and
Sure, yeah.
And I'm busy tattooing, so why don't you start making needles? Why don't you start scrubbing these tubes? I can show you how to mix some pigment so we can get some more red out, or whatever it was, that he was teaching me at the time. And then that eventually evolved into, well, if you're going to do this, you got to start, bring in a friend, and you can fuck him up for a while, and I can give you some pointers on how to do it.
Okay.
And then he was real, generous with all of his knowledge, but at some point, people were coming in there for him specifically, and I'm a new guy, and I wasn't tattooing a lot, outside of my friend group. And so he was real, he's like, if you want to do this, you need to learn how to do this. You need to be tattooing frequently. So he kind of pushed me out of the nest too, and was like, you got to, cut your own path here and figure out a place where you can tattoo every day, not twice a week, and so I was probably at his shop for 2 years, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe 3 from beginning to end, from when I first started just hanging out there till when I left.
Yeah.
It was probably about a 3-year period.
And then if you look at the early milestones of your time with Thomas, like the first time he says, okay, well, fuck, if you're going to hang around, make me some needles. Like, what's going through your mind? Like,
oh, just sheer excitement. I mean, that's what I was just craving as much knowledge as I could get, and it really felt like, I'm probably romanticizing all of this, as we often do, but like, I felt like I was being led into a secret club, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they were teaching me some some shit that I wasn't supposed to know, so it felt, that also was in tune with my, my counterculture rebellious nature, that I was like, fuck yeah, I'm learning. I'm not supposed to know this because I'm just me. I'm not really a tattooer,
That's right.
They're sort of pulling the curtain back and letting me have a glimpse of this. And
he was, in a sense, because who you were engaging with, he had lots of clout, and his career is steeped in lineage and in history.
Totally.
Like when Thomas and I conversed over email for his interview, as I read his story, like it makes my mind spin.
Yeah.
The lengths that he went to collect and to learn, and
he's one of the most impressive people I've ever met in my life. Do you know what I mean? Like the things that he has accomplished outside of tattooing, like commercial airline pilot, like scuba diver, mountain climber, world traveler, sailor. I mean, he's got his papers to navigate by the stars, like there's really nothing he can't do,
Yeah, there's many layers to Tom.
Yeah.
He's extremely intelligent.
For sure.
And just reading his written word too is like he's a very, very intelligent man.
For sure.
Well spoken, and
for sure.
Yeah.
And he's also this like crazy, larger than life personality too.
Pirate.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
pirate, total pirate. You know, like
Yeah.
that man's not scared of anything. You know, like he's not going to
Yeah.
get pushed around or walked on. You know, like he's a pretty cool dude for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like not to get too personal, but my dad was a very similar figure, and so when he passed when I was 25, and then I wound up in Tom's shop almost directly after. He was almost the same figure to me. Do you know what I mean? Like they were very similar people. So,
well, with your dad gone, it would create sort of a vacuum for you to try to look for something that emulated his nature.
Yeah, for sure.
I had a similar experience when my dad passed. There was like this person showed up in my life, and he exuded so many of his qualities. It was so uncanny.
Yeah.
It's like, how did this person just fall in my life?
Totally. And it just feels comfortable and natural, you know? And
Yeah. Well, your dad must have been tremendous guy. Like, if
for sure.
emulating all the qualities that Thomas had.
Yeah, total. Yeah, he was just, I mean, very much like Thomas, sort of a, I don't know how to describe it, just a carefree, no holds barred kind of guy, living life to the fullest all of the time,
Yeah. And I remember when Thomas finally agreed to do an interview with me, how excited I was, and I'm getting an interview from him. I can't imagine when he clicked over and started teaching you how to tattoo. So that's like I could get a little sense of the gravity of what was happening in your world at that time.
Well, that shop in particular, I mean, it was if I can complain about anything, it would be that after I left his shop, everything was a bummer after that. Like it was. Yeah. That place was so much fun, and the atmosphere that existed there, it really was like the last shop of its kind that I've experienced since then. It was a sort of a snapshot into the way that tattooing used to be.
Yeah.
And then when I left and I went to to a series of other shops after that, I'm like, it was just never the same again, and until I got the opportunity to sort of create my own vision of the way that I think a tattoo shop is supposed to be,
Yeah.
But it's when you start out in a shop like that, it's everything else sort of pales in comparison afterwards.
I bet.
Yeah.
And when I came in this morning, the first thing I asked you is, where am I standing? Can you give us a little rundown of the history of this location?
So this was Ace Tattoo in the 70s. I'd have to specifically check to get the dates right, but I believe it was 74 that Brian Zuck started this shop.
Ryan shared his whole history, so I probably have those dates.
Yeah, right on. And then so he was here from the mid 70s till I believe the mid 90s, and then he sold it. And it was still Ace Tattoo, but he moved out to Langley. But in that time, there was a bunch of different tattooers that came through here and worked through here. Dave Shore being one of them. So that it was a tattoo shop from the mid 70s up until the late 90s, and then was briefly a bookstore. And then we opened in 2014. So it's almost been exclusively a tattoo shop for 50 years.
Yeah, and that in itself, there has to be a resonance with all the hours of work in this building.
I think so. Yeah, I feel like it. We always joke because the back door often just closes on its own, and it's just wind traveling through the shop. But we always laugh that it's Dave Shore closing the door. It's his ghost coming through and closing the door.
Sure, yeah.
There goes Dave again.
Yeah, Dave, leave the door open.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And so it was. Immediately I was struck with a feeling. I feel completely honored to be in this space, and it's really nostalgic for me to be here today.
Excellent.
Knowing that who sat in this building and toiled, and the shenanigans that must have unfolded, and the wild parties, and
for sure. Well, it's also great. We have people that come through the door that they're like, I got tattooed back here in 1981, and want to show off their tattoos, and we always take a photo and write down who did it and everything else, and it's the community and the sort of larger community of Vancouver's, I think are the people that have been in here before recognize how great it was in its day, and are pretty happy that there's still something here, I think.
Yeah.
I'd like to think so anyways.
That's right. Why did you call it Palace Tattoo?
2 reasons. There used to be an old, we wanted something, we didn't want to go the sort of Hastings Street tattoo or something that was, specific. We wanted something a little broader. And there used to be a hotel just further down Hastings Street called the Palace Hotel. And so we thought that was fitting. It was already on Hastings Street. It sort of harkened back to, the history of Vancouver, which is sort of, part of what the shop is about. And we also liked that it had Ace in the end of it. So it was Pal Ace, which also was sort of a nod to what was before us as well. So, and also we wanted to build a palace to tattooing. We wanted to build a shrine that was just nothing but tattooing. There was no bullshit. This is traditional tattoos done by tattooers, street shop. Yeah. This is what we want. It's a palace to the idea of what we think tattoo is supposed to be.
Okay. That was definitely a question I had planned to ask maybe further in the interview, but I got real curious, and I love the ace thing on the end too. That's sweet. That's really cool. So going back to your apprenticeship with Tom, he sort of put you through all the traditional paces of what marks an apprenticeship.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, mostly, it was a real, it's just sort of practical thing. Like we were using handmade needles at that point, and steel tubes and autoclaving and all that kind of stuff. So I think that he, it was beneficial to him that I do all that stuff, so he didn't have to do it and could just focus on tattooing.
Yeah.
So I was doing all that stuff. And then that expanded to sort of like I got interested in, he used to mix all his own pigments, and so he had tons and tons of powdered pigments in his shop, and that went into me exploring how to mix pigments and make my own.
Yeah.
I think the thing I learned the most from Tom, I think tattooing's like, learning how to play guitar. You got to just start doing it to actually figure out how to do it. Nobody can really. People can give you tips and pointers and troubleshoot things for you, but until you're doing it, nobody can teach you to do it. You got to just start doing it. I think what I learned most from Tom was all the extraneous stuff about tattooing, like the history of it, the morality of it. You know what I mean? And like how to be a good tattooer, and how to run a good business, and which direction a stencil's supposed to face, and like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not the tactical part. I think people today get hung up on learning how to apply a tattoo. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, as part of what their apprenticeship is.
There's an etiquette.
Exactly. Exactly.
Morals and why we do things and why we don't do things.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that makes up a good portion of the whole of it as well. Like and it might get sort of second glance, or people just take a little glance maybe, but not really consider it as deeply as they should.
Yeah, exactly. I always remember the old saying, be good to tattooing and tattooing will be good to you.
Yeah.
And I think the vast majority of people don't really understand what that means,
That's right.
And I think to me what it means is adhering to that morality and that etiquette, and like, you're not supposed to do that. Don't just do that for money. Be good to tattooing, and tattooing will be good to you.
That's right.
And I think that gets lost today. People don't really understand the significance of what that is. And I think that I learned all that from Tom. That was the most important thing that he gave me.
Yeah, and I've experienced just that in my 32 years of tattooing so far. Like I've poured a lot of heart into what I do and care a lot about tattooing, and the result is, I feel like the fucking luckiest guy in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
To do all this, to
travel around. Yeah, it's awesome.
In front of, listen to Tom and hear the Dutchman and just all these people that, that it makes up this Canadian history. I just feel like the luckiest fucker in the world.
It's awesome. Well, kudos to you for doing it. It's impressive, and I can't wait to see the culmination of all of it for sure.
Me too. It's at this point. And I think right from the start, it was doing me. And it's something that I was guided and led to.
Right.
And like you got the slap in the back of the head, say, why aren't you tattooing? I had sort of had the same slap to do this history project, and now it's turned into a much bigger thing. So
I think it's really important. I think, with sort of this new crop of tattoo historians that exist now, and books that are being written about the history, I think a lot of them get hung up on addresses and dates and things that don't really speak to the culture of tattooing, that are just sort of pragmatic ideas. Like this guy worked in this town for this long. Factual information, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think tattooing and the history of tattooing exists in the oral history of it, and the lineage of it, and it doesn't exist, in Ancestry.com. That's not where you find tattoo history. Like this is where you find tattoo history, and not all of it's true.
Yeah,
but that's tattoo history.
Yeah.
A lot of it's bullshit, but that bullshit's born out of some truth somewhere.
And you won't read in other books, like when you went into Charlie's Snow Shop and Annie was sitting in the front, if you weren't wearing your singlet, she would yell at you.
Yeah.
You ain't wearing your singlet. You go home and get, those little details. Like,
absolutely.
People just don't know anything about that.
Absolutely.
I
mean, I have, since the very beginning, before I started tattooing, just my interest in tattoos and history and stuff, I've been taking photographs of old tattoos that I'd see on the street. Even pre-cell phones and smartphones, I would carry a camera around with me just in case. And my wife used to hate it because we'd be in a mall and, just wait a second, just wait here. And 25 minutes I'd be talking to some senior citizen in the corner trying to enjoy a coffee, But that's part of it for me, is listening to those guys' stories, And what you learn is, like, a lot of it is not accurate, in terms of they're looking at it through their perspective of what they experienced, and maybe getting their first tattoo in 1958, and they stepped off of a boat in Hong Kong and they were in a completely different universe to them, and the emotions and everything else that are swirling around maybe color their perspective of what their experience was. But what you see after you've talked to 200 of these guys is there's a common thread. There's a thread that ties it all through, and you can sort of discern after a while. Oh yeah, well, this is what this guy's shop was like, or this was the commonality between why these guys from this particular navy went here, or whatever else, right? And I think that you can garner a lot of really interesting stuff that way, because I don't think what address one guy worked at for 5 years really matters, Doesn't to me, anyways, Or details if they got busted for cocaine. Yeah. Like, that's just fucking gossip. Yeah, totally. I don't give a rat's ass who was busted for drugs. Yeah, I don't either. It doesn't really... It's not tattoo history. No, exactly. It's just gossip at its best. But so, you said you were with Thomas for 2 years. And anything to highlight in that time? Any nostalgic memories? I mean, lots, there are tons. I don't know that... It's a loaded question. I don't have 4 hours today. And there's a lot of stuff that's sort of like, impacted me that I'm sure Tom probably doesn't remember at all, because over the course of his 40 years of tattooing, it was probably just every day for him. But for me, it was shocking or like amazing. Or so there's some things I don't know that I want to get too deep into, because I don't know if he wants me to share them, or if you know what I mean. I don't know. I've heard all kinds of stories. Mild to wild. Exactly. You have at least half an hour. So okay. I don't know. I'll tell you one story that I don't know. I'll roll the dice here and see if it's... Tom's shop was down on Davie Street. Davie, just between Granville and Seymour, which is sort of skirts the West End, which is where my family is from. Historically, real busy part of downtown. Awesome shop, awesome location, and lots of walk-in traffic. And there was a bunch of gangsters that used to come in there and get tattooed. And there would be one guy who would usually bring in 2 or 3 of his cronies, and they'd all be there the whole day, and they'd all get tattooed. And one guy would peel off a big, wad of hundreds and pay for everybody at the end of the day. And they were in there getting tattooed one day, and it was getting late, and they all wanted to split, and one guy was still getting tattooed. So the guy said, "Oh, I'll pay for my friend, We're all leaving. You can finish tattooing him. So we peeled off all this money, put it on Tom's desk, and Tom shoved it into a jar that he had on his desk there. They kept tattooing, and it was getting late, and I wasn't doing anything. So I was like, I'm going to hit the road, Tom. And he was like, yeah, no problem. So I split, went home. I lived in the West End, not far away. And then I came back the next morning, and when I opened the door, there was like blood all over the floor, and like blood spatter sort of up on a bunch of these sheets. And Tom rolls his bike in, and I'm like, what the fuck is all this? And he was like, that guy that I was tattooing at the end of the day, I finished tattooing him, and I went into the bathroom, and when I came out, he was wrist deep in my jar with all the money in my hand and tried to hightail it with the cash without paying me. And so he grabbed his baton that was by his station and chased him out the door, clubbing him over the head with it, and created all this fucking mess as he ran out the door. And I was like, I mean, that was, you know, that was unusual to me, but it was, you know, that's the way that shop was, you know.
And then did he end it with like, I hate it when that happens?
Yeah, basically, yeah, exactly.
You know what company you're in front of.
Yeah, exactly.
And he ends it with that.
No, exactly. There was no, like, he didn't take any shit, that's for sure. And these guys were gangsters, you know. It wasn't it wasn't some kid, you know, and he wasn't scared to, you know, stand his ground no matter who it was, for sure. So
yeah, good for him.
Yeah, and there was lots of like partying, drinking, and like, you know, and all the stuff that goes along with that as well. So
yeah,
it was fun. It was fun. So I thought that that's the way every tattoo shop was, you know. So when I left, I'm like, where's all the drugs?
Yeah, no doubt. So after 2 years, why did you leave? Like,
he just pushed me out. He was just he I think wanted me to succeed a little more than I was, and I mean people were coming in for him, you know, like he was working on sleeves and back pieces and all that kind of stuff, and I was just waiting on walk-ins and then, you know, tattooing my broke friends whenever they could scrounge up enough money and that kind of thing. Sure. So I just wasn't tattooing a lot, and I think he understood that if I wanted to make a career out of this, I needed to be tattooing a lot more than I was. So
yeah. And so where did you set your sights on going?
I didn't. I just kind of went. I went to a new shop that was opened on Broadway in Kitts for a while. That didn't really work out, and I kind of went. I ended up at Sacred Heart, where I was sort of a bigger name shop in town at that time, and I was there for a while. I just didn't find a place where I fit in, you know, especially at that time, because I have this theory that, you know, in the States, traditional tattooing flourished for a lot longer than it did in Canada, that you had major military spots, you know, Norfolk, Virginia, San Diego, you know, throughout the United States, where this sort of payday culture of tattooing, where, you know, sailors would get their checks and come in and get tattooed and pick off the wall, never really went away. And tattooers could just make a living just doing flash and just doing traditional style tattoos on Navy guys or military guys. Whereas I think in Canada, when the military got super diminished, you know, even out here, they basically moved the Pacific Fleet out to Halifax. And there's not a lot of Navy out here. There's very little military. Yeah. It completely shifted to custom tattooing, you know, and that became the norm. And then so when I arrived in the early 2000s, and all I was interested in was traditional tattooing, and I wanted daggers and panthers and pinups and stuff. It just wasn't available here. You know, nobody did it in a traditional way. You know, everyone did it in a very modern way, which led me to go down to the States to start getting really heavily tattooed, because I found that they had a much deeper understanding of that aesthetic, you know, than we did up here.
That's right.
And then so when I started tattooing, and I was in tattoo shops that were largely custom shops, I always felt like I was looked down upon or sort of got ribbed for, you know, tracing a pinup off a sheet of flash, you know, like, you should draw that. I'm like, but I'm not going to draw it any better than what it looks now, because I want it to look like that, you know. That's the way it's supposed to look. I'm not trying to, you know, reinvent the wheel here. I just want to replicate these really traditional, solid designs that I think have a lot of value, you know. Yeah, absolutely. And the Americans, you know, sort of jockey and appreciate their history more than Canadians. That's obvious, because I'm
sort of the first one to really take a massive dive into collecting the history.
For sure.
There was the other guy doing it, Jamie Jelinski, who was researching, but it was more like just a university research project.
Yeah.
It's not about really the tradition and history.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
So, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, when Thomas said, "Okay, it's time to go," where did that land in your heart? Like, it would fuck me up.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that bad for me. I don't know. I just was still so thirsty, you know, and I wanted to tattoo more, you know, like I wanted to be doing it all the time, and I just wasn't there. And so the idea of being able to do it more frequently, I think, overrode any. And I didn't think Tom, to be honest with you, I thought Tom's shop would be there forever. Do you know what I mean? And it would sort of be, you know, like going away to college, you could always return home. You know what I mean? And then, so I didn't think that much about it, I don't think. I always thought I could just go back there. It would always be there.
Yeah.
And then I think he was probably there for another 5 years or so after I left.
Yeah.
And then he had to move.
Unfortunately for me, I never got to go into the shop. Early in the project, Thomas was not really supportive of me doing this. I don't think he he didn't really know who I am.
Right.
He just, maybe he didn't understand of my love and devotion to tattooing. And he offered me a black eye if I showed up.
Really?
So, and so I went to the shop to collect it, and he wasn't there. There was part of me that was relieved, but another part was sad because I didn't have the opportunity to stand in front of him and respectfully ask if he would do the profile or do an interview in person, and because it was so important to me. But I just left a card on his door, and so I never did get to see into that shop.
Are you hooking up with him this time?
Not this time.
Okay.
But we have interviewed, and
right on.
Yeah, I'm so humbled to have gathered a really good profile from him in his own word. So
right on.
Pretty much written his own profile.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So where did you bounced around to a few different shops, and then at what point did you procure this location?
I had looked for a really, really long time. I was tattooing at a shop again on Davie Street, and it was collectively owned by a bunch of tattooers, and I could tell that it wasn't going well. And my wife was pregnant with our first child at that point, and like really pregnant, like 2 weeks away. Yeah. And their lease was coming up, and I knew that it was a precarious situation, and I needed to continue to work. So I found a private studio, basically just an apartment to rent, and I rented it to work out of, which was not for me, and I hated every minute of it.
Yeah.
But from that moment, I was like, I got to find a space. I got to open up a shop. And so me and Chris, my business partner who co-owns Palace with me, spent hours and hours and hours just wandering the city. When my daughter was really young, she slept in the stroller, no problem. So we would chuck her into the stroller and just spend hours walking around downtown, looking for storefronts and sort of daydreaming about what could be and what we could rent. I finally ended up finding a place in Chinatown and signed a lease. And then as soon as I got in there to start building it, I discovered very quickly that the roof was shot and that water had been leaking down the walls, and the insides of the walls were just coated in black mold.
Okay.
And it just wasn't a viable place anymore. And so I had to go to the landlord and say, you got to tear up my lease. I can't open up a business here, which he did. But I was so deflated at that point, and so after like a number of years of looking for a space, that another tattooer I knew had just signed a lease on this spot and was going to open up this place.
Okay.
And so I just thought, well, fuck it, man. I just need a place to tattoo and get back in a shop. And so me and Chris both came here and started working at this shop, which was a different name under different ownership. And then that quickly changed to me and Chris basically taking over, and that other tattooer decided he didn't want to be a tattooer anymore and exited, and me and Chris took over very early on. And yeah, we've been here ever since. Almost 11 years now.
Because that would be a pinnacle moment for me to get this location of any store in town, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Bar, getting Curly's old shop or Forbes's old shop.
Yeah.
Up the street.
Yeah.
But still, there's so much history in this place.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's almost destined to be yours.
Yeah.
Because of your dedication and your deep interest in history.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it did not unfold at all the way that I wanted it to, or the way that I envisioned it, but it happened all the same. I'm right where I want to be.
The end result.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
In spite of your effort
to
be somewhere else.
Tattoo gods, make it happen.
Make things happen.
Yeah.